Mike Joy is next with Cup Practice.
You're watching Speed's coverage of Speed Weeks, presented by Hershey's Milk and Milkshakes. Daytona 500 pole sitter Mark Martin climbs aboard for this practice run. Outside pole sitter Dale Jr. getting ready to roll. As compared to the last practice you saw on Speed, things will be different. Hi, everybody, with Darrell Waltrip, Larry McReynolds. I'm Mike Joy. This single car, how fast can you go? Get ready to run for the pole practice. Over and done with. Now we're going to find out about drafting, about bump drafting, and not bump till you drafting like we saw last Saturday night.
Yeah, this is called practice, and I don't need no stinking practice. You know, I think I'm like Kevin Harvick. I'm gonna get sick and lay over in the coach and let somebody else do all the heavy lifting. And when the car gets right, I'll show up and win the race. So that's the way I'd like to do it. But Larry, you know, like I do, you got to get out here. You got to get amongst them. You got to see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here almost a week, and these race cars, for the most part, because these are not the Budweiser shootout cars, they've had a total of 4 laps. 2 laps of practice before the rains moved in on Friday, and then basically 2 laps of qualifying. These are not the shootout cars. Yeah, the safest place for these cars are in the garage area during this practice, but we have to get out there. We have to make long runs because we saw some evil driving race cars Saturday night in the shootout.
Yeah, you just don't know what your car is going to do. I mean, it's pretty comfortable, but you don't know what it's going to do until you get in there with 8 or 10 other guys, and somebody's pushing, somebody's pulling, and somebody's shoving you a little bit.
For some of these drivers, 39 of them to be exact, these practice runs are to work on setup and to get ready to race. But for the rest of the 54-car field, it's nail-biting time because those drivers don't know if they're going to be in the Daytona 500, and they've got 2 chances left to make the show.
And you know, I said Saturday night for the Bud Shootout, it was dancing with the cars. This truly is right now. You'll get with different people. You want to find out, who do I run well with? Do I run better pushing Tony Stewart, or do I run better with Jimmy Johnson behind me? Am I good behind a Ford? Am I good behind a Dodge, a Toyota? You know, you just kind of play the game right now, trying to figure out what's the best scenario.
Quick look at our Gillette track description. As cars are on track, logging laps. The Daytona International Speedway is 2.5 miles around, as you know. And did you know the straightaways were slightly banked for drainage?
That's amazing. 18 degrees of banking in the tri-oval alone right here at the start-finish line area. I don't think we realize it has that much banking. There's a lot of tracks we go to. They don't have that much banking in the corner.
No, when you go down after the race, for instance, and if you decide to go across here to the infield, that is a steep incline. I've seen people tumble down that little incline right there. 18 degrees, a lot of banking, and boy, are they already mixing it up? Oh no, it was Carl in the 99 there, getting a plug check.
Tell you what I do see at the front of this pack, I see all 4 of the Hendrick cars. You know, last year in 2009, Hendrick came here. You see Dale Earnhardt Jr. on the inside falling back a little bit, but they were off last year with their restrictor plate program. But they came here loaded for bear. All 4 in the top 10. Throw Ryan Newman in the mix with the 39 car with their engine package. 5 of the top 10.
I tell you, and Dale Jr., he's got to find a setup that he can race. Because the other night, I mean, you know, he was on the front row with he and Mark Martin on the front row. But, man, when that green flag dropped for the Bud Shootout, his car was not good. He fell back, and he couldn't drive it. Same old complaint. Something about the right front wasn't right, and the car wasn't hooking up. They got to fix that thing somehow.
And in fairness, that was a completely different Hendrick Motorsports Chevy and completely different setup than what they had in qualifying. But I agree with you, Darrell. That's job one right now for that team, is to have a car that Dale Jr. can be comfortable with and drive and draft with.
I would put him out there in what I think could be a good, you know, whatever I think would be right for the car. I would tell him to stay out there for at least 20 laps. Don't go out and run 8, 10, 15 laps and come back in. And get out there and make a long run, because that's where he had trouble, was at the 20-lap mark the other night.
Here is the quickest car, Matt Kenseth. You're looking back at Matt, the Daytona 500 champion of 2009. with a 46.33. He and Kyle Busch and Brian Vickers are the fastest so far.
And you see him running to the outside of the 9-car Casey Kane. Boy, they start stacking up there. Brian Vickers in the 83 looked like he jumped out of the throttle. But the Roush Fenway cars, they may have not been overly fast qualifying, but that group of cars actually looked pretty good in that shootout Saturday night.
Of course, let's take a look at this. I think what you'll see happen, I believe it's one of the cars up there. Yeah, Jimmy Johnson got loose. Greg Biffle lifts, and you see the chain reaction. Johnson gets loose. Biffle lifts. Here comes the 39 and Newman. Here comes the 83. They all just pile in on top of each other. That was almost the start of a big crash. And you can't avoid that.
No.
There's nothing you can do about that.
No, just as if you were driving that close together on the highway at 70 miles an hour and the car in front has a problem. 70, 190, not a lot of difference.
Yeah, big difference.
Trouble is trouble. Welcome back to Daytona Sprint Cup practice for the Gatorade duels that you'll see live on Thursday here on Speed. Here are the Fast Five as we go down to the garage area. First to Chris Devoto.
Mike, you, Daryl, Larry talking about how Jimmy Johnson's car loose on the racetrack. It was loose the last time he was on the racetrack Saturday night. He and his crew chief Chad Knaus also kept things loose during the off days. They played golf on Monday, and they've been loose in this practice in terms of their radio chatter. Chad told his driver, "I'm sending you out there on a set of scuffs." Jimmy said, "Thanks a lot." Chad said, "I trust your talent." Over to the other end of the garage and Matt Yoakum.
Chris, the Speed Week is all about building momentum towards Sunday's Daytona 500, and Jamie McMurray is certainly on his way, a third in Saturday night shootout. He's got 2 restrictor plate victories on his racing resume. The agenda for this practice session, simply get a good baseline with this race car. Larry Mack mentioned different cars today versus Saturday night. Although this car was built alongside the shootout car, every car can be a little bit finicky. They already found out that TAC has an issue. They'll fix that next time in the garage. Guys?
Thanks, Matt. Tomorrow is what we're practicing for, the Gatorade duel at Daytona. That will set the field for the Daytona 500, and most importantly, we'll know who goes on and who goes home. It's live tomorrow on Speed, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, unfortunately, the box is only big enough for 43 cars to play on Sunday, so we know after those duel races tomorrow that 11 teams will not make the Daytona 500.
Darryl, look at all this 3 wide, and I mean, this is a little dicey for practice, don't you think?
It is, and trust me, as a driver, I hated to do this, but I also hated to get in the race and scream I can't drive my car.
All clear.
And so right you're between a rock and a hard place. You got to get yourself in these precarious situations so that you can give some feedback to the crew as to what the car is doing when I am, because that's the way it's going to be Sunday. You got to kind of emulate what you're going to do Sunday right here in practice, even though it's dangerous.
Well, and chances are that's the way it's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tomorrow too, exactly.
Yeah.
You see that Red Bull car there, 82 car of Scott Speed, one of the cars coming in here outside the top 35, but he laid down a good enough qualifying run on Saturday afternoon that car is locked into the show on Speed. He can still race his way in, but he knows he'll be racing on Sunday.
Bill Elliott, Joe Nemechek, Scott Speed.
And Bobby Labonte.
Yes. Are the drivers who know they'll be in the 500 from the Go or Go Home group. Cars like that 66 of Dave Blaney do not, and will have to race their way in.
And you know, there'll be a lot of deal making going on during those dual races. What I was just looking at the starting lineup, Scott Speed will be in the second race. Of course, he is locked in, but his teammate is in there. Where on the flip side of that, Michael Waltrip is the 4th Michael Waltrip racing car. He is in a dual race aside from his 3 teammates. His 3 teammates are in the other dual race. So we'll see a lot of deal making going on.
Well, so if you're a multi-car team owner like Michael Waltrip is, and you have cars that are locked in and cars that are not in a race, it would seem like your agenda is pretty clear. Going to be help me help you.
Well, talk to Ty Norris, of course, that works over there at Michael Waltrip Racing. He said that Bobby Labonte is in the race with the 3 other Michael Waltrip cars. Trust me, they will be trying to help Bobby Labonte race his way in because Michael is the next car to go in on Speed.
Right. Lots of agenda.
But it is some of the most compelling racing that we'll have those dual races tomorrow.
That number 90? Casey Muir is one of the cars that's not locked in.
He's got to race his way in, and I think the name of that team is very fitting for tomorrow's races. Keyed Up Motorsports.
Keyed Up.
Larry, let's take a look at, you talk about practice, and you heard Chad tell Jimmy Johnson, I trust your judgment, I trust your talent. Let's take a look at Jimmy Johnson. Here he is in traffic, heavy traffic, cars all around him, cars moving, things are happening here. And I got a feeling the car looks like it's pretty loose. And then we go around and watch this. So next time by, things start to get really tight in front of him. Cars moving around. He starts to the inside. And he takes a look at what's in front of him. And he says, boys, I've made an executive decision.
That's the reason Chad trusts his decisions.
I am out of here. Y'all go ahead. I think two things. He didn't like what he saw in front of him, and particularly with the way his car's handling.
Now, very different the setup under these cars from the Bud Shootout. I mean, the Bud Shootout, everybody set up for the short run. You just didn't have the long, sustained, full tank of gas run you're going to have here, at least on Sunday.
Well, it would be maybe a decent starting point, but I will guarantee you, and I talked to some crew chiefs, a lot of them were back at their shops the last 3 days the track has been closed, with the engineers running simulations of different setups based on the information gathered from the Budweiser Shootout on Saturday night, when I think there were a lot of cars that were very, very loose.
All right, you saw the 27 pass there. Driver change. Kurt Shelmerdine out. Todd Bodine, the former Truck Series champ, replacing him to try to get the 27 into the 500. Krista?
Well, you mentioned Jimmy Johnson, Mike. No surprise to you guys probably that the first word he said to his crew when he came in, it's loose. Loose in, better grip center off, he said, but the entry is just too uncomfortable.
And then we see it. He's just tippy-toeing getting in, and it's really messing up the whole corner for him, because it's almost like he's dirt tracking into the turn, which is making it real loose and then kind of making him tight off.
Matt?
Mike, the punch list for Kyle Busch small here in the 18 garage. He said he felt like the team needed to work on the carburetor a little bit more to help the car suck up better in traffic. He also reported the temperatures only got to about 200. One other issue that they've just completed working on, and that was the side mirror. They took it off, they adjusted around, trying to help his vision on the left side of the race car, and that's primarily been the biggest adjustment they've made so far.
What they can work on real quickly to make the car run better. You can't necessarily do much to the carburetor. It is what it is. But that air box, that little air box that sits at the base of the windshield, that affects how the car runs as much as anything about a restricted car, a restricted plate car.
And it could be looking for a different configuration to run fast by yourself, like qualifying versus running fast in a big pack in the draft.
Yeah, airflow is so different once you open up the grill a little bit and get out there in a pack of cars.
2 Fords, 2 Toyotas, and a Chevy in the Fast 5 right now. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice brought to you by Hershey's Milk and Milkshakes. Try a new way to indulge in Hershey's. By DirecTV. To get the most out of your high-def TV, you gotta hook it up to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV. And by the Sponsifier. Visit ToyotaRacing.com beginning February 12th and enter your design.
We're talking about the we call them air boxes, but they're not actually boxes anymore. We used to be able to take this and hook it right up to the back of the air cleaner, which made it a solid. It's more like cowl induction now. The air that comes off the windshield actually goes into the cowl induction. And the size of this, there's a specification here for the size. It can only be so wide. It's got to be certain width right there. But you have maximum. But as far as I know, do you have a minimum size if you want to narrow it up a little bit?
You can go smaller, but I definitely think there is a minimum and a maximum. Yeah.
So anyway, that's that one thing right there. It's a pretty minor look, but that's how you get air into the engine, and that's how the engine tuner, how the car runs. And then what affects it more than anything is when you get out here in race configuration and you start to open up the grill to get the temps to run at a race at an acceptable temperature for the race, more air will go into the radiator, and that will change the pressure under the hood and also change the cowl pressure. So sometimes you have to really monkey with that thing, try some different configurations. Sometimes they're kind of like a J, which is one way they make them. I've seen them straight in like that. So there's a number of configurations that you try to see how it performs in traffic and by yourself. So that's Airbox 101 for the day.
Okay.
Tomorrow I'm going to explain how a 3-disc clutch works.
Krista.
Jeff Gordon is out of his race car. Jeff, you said the car is driving really good. Just a couple of things we might want to do to it. Could you clue us into maybe one or two of those?
No.
I didn't think so. What do you need out of your race car on the track right now?
Well, you know, in a practice like today, what you're trying to do is get yourself into the worst positions you possibly think you can be in without you're risking it too much, which in practice we don't want to do that. But you got to feel what the car is going to do tomorrow in traffic and for the Daytona 500, which is obviously what we're all here for. So DuPont Chevrolet's good, real good. Speed's good. You know, we had good handling the other night. I felt like we could have made it a little bit better, and I think they've done just that. Now there's some shocks, you know, that we can play around with. We're going to mess around a little bit of left front geometry here. Other than that, I think we're pretty close.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Darrell, that cowl opening, it cannot be bigger than 2.5 inches by 20 wide. But based on the rule book, there is no minimum, and I know sometimes a little smaller hole may run faster by yourself.
Yeah, it's volume, or you can narrow it down and get velocity. And so that's again, it's just a little tuning device, just like the things Jeff was talking about. A little left front geometry. It's a minor change, but it could affect the way the driver, how the car feels to the driver, and sometimes those are the most critical things.
Last time we saw Kurt Busch, it was after the Bud shootout, and he was kind of apologizing to his car owner Roger Penske for tearing up 2 of them. One in practice, and this one in the Budweiser shootout off the bumper of Mark Martin. And
this is the shootout here.
This one, the first one was practice on Montoya. Here's the shootout. And what everybody talked about, Darrell, was what a grass cutter that splitter was going through the infield, so much so that the force of it blew that hood right up and over the windshield.
Yeah, it just shot all that dirt and grass underneath the car, right where the radiator is, and it just actually like blew up the hood.
So this is Kurt's 3rd car of the week, and he hasn't even got to see a checkered flag yet.
Well, you can really see that fin on that left side right there. That's the grass. And,
it looks, you still see tracks where Kurt went through.
This is Landscape 101.
Yeah, that's where he went through. But that fin is, I mean, that thing is so much bigger than what it has been in the past. In the past, it didn't go down the back like that. And what NASCAR did in the wind tunnel, they got to monkeying around with that thing and found out that with that fin on there, if the car does get around backwards, it will actually allow the car to be 10 miles an hour faster than it has been in the past, and still not lift off. So it's just another one of those safety devices, really, more than anything.
We'll show you another look of what happened Saturday night with Kurt Busch as practice rolls on for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel. Cut the grass, watch this.
It's one thing to hit something, but not be able to see it before you hit it.
As practice for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel continues, let's take a look at the go-or-go-home situation. We know from Saturday's time trials that the top 4 drivers on the graphic will race because they have the 4 fastest time trial speeds of those not in the top 35. Now, right below those next 4 drivers could get in the race on speed if any of the 4 drivers above them race their way in on Thursday. If all 4 drivers on the top of the graphic race their way in, Waltrip, Bliss, Sorensen, and Mears, then they all get in on speed. But those 4 could also race their way in, and so must these drivers. Their qualifying speed was not quick enough to make the Daytona 500 on speed, so their only chance is to be one of the 2 highest finishers in their Gatorade Duel among the drivers not yet in the race.
And you know, we were talking about that at a press conference this morning about just how the intensity level has changed in these Gatorade Duel races. You know, back in the day before the top 35, you knew if you came down here and you finished in the top 18, top 20 of the Gatorade Duel race, you probably were going to be okay. You probably were going to be in the Daytona 500. But as we saw a few years ago, Robbie Gordon finished 7th and still did not make the Daytona 500.
You know, we talking about Jimmy Johnson's back out there, by the way. You see him here on the outside line. These cars, I think, are probably giving the crew chiefs a little bit more heartburn than normal, because with the bigger plate and the aero package they got and the shock combination they got, these cars are straightaway speeds are really high. And so you are really attacking that third turn probably at a higher rate of speed than you ever have here before, particularly with this car. I think that's why corner entry is causing a bit of a problem for some of these guys trying to get the car tight enough getting in the corner so they don't have to lift out the throttle.
Yeah, 40 cars qualified faster than Martin Truex Jr.'s pole speed from a year ago. That's how much faster this field of cars is.
Looking back at David Rudiman in the 00. Here's Matt.
My confidence is high. The first run during this practice session ran 9 laps, so the car was pretty good. He felt like the back of the car stayed free all the way through the corner, but he did lose the nose when he went over the bumps, and then when the nose finally caught, it snapped loose. So they made some small adjustments on that. And, you know, Jeff Gordon earlier was talking about the risk versus reward during this practice session. If you get a look at the 33 at Clint Boyer, he's got a very nice size Martinsville-type donut on the right door.
I know people up on the East Coast probably don't want to hear me talk about snow, but really a race car, driving a race car is just like trying to drive on snow. If you turn the wheels too much to the left, when they finally do hook up, the back end will spin around. You've got to really stay off the brakes, locking up the tires. You can't drive the car. There's so many things that apply to racing on or driving on snow that are very similar to what you do with a race car.
Now, of the go-or-go-homers, Scott Speed is quickest. Mike Bliss, second fastest. Casey Mears, Todd Bodine, and Michael Waltrip are the quickest in this session of the go-or-go-home list.
You know, we talk about speeds. Right now, Matt Kenseth, he's put up the fastest lap of this practice session, and it was on his third lap at a 46.33, and that is over 194 miles per hour. Of course, that's when you get the big numbers, is when they're all out there at the beginning of the practice, the beginning of a run, and you've got them in big packs lined up, maybe even running down another pack.
Yeah, and see, what you don't know as a driver, your car, you're very happy. Your car's very comfortable. You're able to go where you want to. Then you run up on a guy that isn't in that same shape. His car's not handling so good. He's not so happy, and he's not real sure what to do. And here you are, you're good, and he's not. And first thing you know, you're running over him because he has to lift out the throttle or something.
Practice rolls on for the Gatorade Duels. You're riding with Kyle Busch, who has the second fastest lap of the day. Well, the home track near us this week is the 2.5-mile Daytona International Speedway, where Matt Kenseth, Kyle Busch, and Brian Vickers have put up the big numbers. But the folks we are watching closely are the go-or-go-home list: Scott Speed, Mike Bliss, Casey Mears, and now Michael McDowell are the fast 4 in that group. Time to join, what you call him, Darrell, Saturday night?
A sick little man.
He is now a $200,000 richer man, and he's with Yoakum.
Fixed him right up.
DW, just call him Big Giant Money, because that's what he took home on Saturday night. Different car, same setup as Saturday night. Are you pleased with it?
I like the way the car's handling. It seems like I can still maneuver the thing. Got a couple little intake manifold things that we want to put back on that we had on the other car Saturday night. So put those back on for the second session, but the handling's really good, and that's the most important thing.
If there's anything you can fine-tune on this car during this session, what would it be?
Just trying to get it to suck up just a touch better. Obviously, track position is still going to be pretty important, because you can't make up a lot of ground in the first 10 or 12 laps, but after that, you know, the thing's really handling well. So that's the most important thing, and hopefully we can keep our Shell Pennzoil Chevy straight and going in the right direction and keep it handling good, and we'll be fine.
He said it was a rocket ship on Saturday night with their shootout car, hoping for the same thing with the 500 car. And Larry Mack, you heard Kevin talk about the manifolds. They're going to try a couple of different manifolds. They're going to take a manifold off the engine from the shootout winner and put it on this engine for the next practice, just to see if it might be a little bit better than what they've got here.
And Darrell, they can actually move the power band a little bit with that intake manifold. You know, these are the engines that they qualified with. You get one engine change during speed weeks with no penalty, and that's after the Gatorade duel race, as long as you have your race engine in there by final practice on Saturday.
See, it's back to that same thing we were talking about, the air box. When you qualify, or when you know you're going to be able to hold the car wide open, then you want volume. You want a lot of volume going down in that engine because you're going to be able to use it. But when you get part throttle and have to get on and off the gas, then you want to have the velocity of that, make the car accelerate at part throttle.
Having a look at Reed Sorensen here in the Dollar General Toyota. And Darrell, he's right in the middle of the go or go home group based on practice times. And he's one of those drivers that just has one and only one chance to make this race. He has to race his way in.
Well, he ran pretty good here last year in the Daytona 500. And so and that's a very good team. I think they're knowledgeable enough, and I think the equipment's probably good enough that things go his way, he could get in.
See, Bill Elliott there, the 21 car, he by far was the fastest of the go or go home cars. In fact, after practice, we thought he may have had a shot at the pole, but he ended up 4th quickest in this 21 car. So Bill Elliott and that group, the Wood brothers, they know they will be racing on Sunday.
Well, the way the wind picked up late in the session, I think if he'd had an early draw, like we talked at the top of the show, he might well have been on the pole. Right next to Elliott, the third.
Watch it. I tell you, Denny Hamlin is he's practicing rather aggressively. Watch this here, coming through 3 and 4 here, and you know, it's a good thing that Brad Keselowski got a little loose off of 4 right there. May had to lift up a little bit because Denny just squeezed right in front of him. That was really way too close.
Still 3 wide, 2 wide. Look back outside.
And that little bump wasn't to help Denny Hamlin.
No.
It was to let him know that, hey, dude, chop my nose off.
Probably the exit of turn 4 is the most difficult spot on this racetrack for a driver, because the spotters up on the roof above us are looking straight on at the noses of the car, and there's no way a spotter can confidently clear a driver when they're coming straight at them.
And it's tough going away towards turn 1, but the thing about turn 4, Mike, is these cars get into a run, it seems like the car just wants to lunge to the outside, even if you're on the inside of a car, and it gets pretty treacherous over there.
Artie Kempner, our director, is going to show us what view the spotters have, as there they are up on their perch right above us. See, it's head on. So is there room to squeeze in that hole? Well, looks like there might be, but you can't say it with a whole lot of certainty.
This racetrack was one of those places when I always questioned my spotter. When he said I was clear, I almost had to know from inside the car, from either my mirror or from just feeling my track presence, that I had room to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually spotted here. I spotted here for Mike Skinner in a couple of truck races. And the best thing you could tell that driver in that same configuration we were just seeing, can't tell until you're sure. Because you'd rather play it safe, especially in practice.
The best thing I can tell any driver is just stay on that yellow line. That'll make yours and my job a whole lot easier.
Look at how much Casey Kane bounces around in the seat.
One of the things I talked to John Darby, and I mentioned this to Larry, they realize that that 9 got sucked around there by Scott speeding 82. One of the things that they realize now is this shock package they have on the rear of these cars is a little too aggressive, and it's particularly because of the bumps. And what's happened with the shock package is the guys, they have a valve they can open up or close. Closed up makes the shock really aggressive. Opened up makes it less aggressive. And they can't open it up. They got it all the way open, and they need a little bit more adjustment. They were thinking about making a change here, but they don't have time.
Krista?
Mike, I'm standing down here in Casey Kane's garage stall, and we can't obviously see him on the track from here, but it's funny, as soon as you and Darrell mentioned that he was bouncing out there on the racetrack, that's exactly what some of his crew members were doing. They were kind of waving their hands in the air, talking about the bounce. Casey is actually just trying to work in traffic out there. He said the car was pretty good on the first run, and he's really pleased with how the back end of the car is in the track. He said that's a lot better than it was in the shootout.
Boy, it sure doesn't look very good. From up here where I'm standing, that thing is moving around a lot, and you can see with his hands, he's juking around on that wheel pretty good, and that's because the car is really jumping around.
You know, I think we should probably even go just a little bit further on this spring and shock deal in the rear. Unlike the downforce tracks, like next week at California, Las Vegas, where teams have an option of what they run shock-wise or spring-wise, NASCAR mandates the rate of the rear springs. They give you a little adjustment in the right rear to run a little stiffer, but they actually issue the teams their shock package. Every team that races Sunday and races tomorrow will have the same shock package, with the exception of what Darrell talked about, the adjustments that they can make to open them up or close them up a little bit. And it's just to keep everybody, for the most part, on equal ground as how far you travel the back of the car, because the more you travel it, the faster it's going to go. It won't drive very good, though.
And with 50 cars here, that would be 100 shocks that they would have to revalve, and they just don't have time to get that done here.
Catching a little sun and maybe a little lunch here at Daytona. A little lunchtime plus coverage of practice for the Gatorade Duels live on Speed tomorrow to set the field for the Daytona 500. Robbie Gordon is the last of the top 35 cars that are locked into the race to come out and practice today.
Boy, Allmendinger in that 43 car there, man, he was kind of juking and jiving down the bottom of turn 1 and 2 down there, hitting those bumps.
Yeah, Robbie was pretty fast in the one practice run that he made on Friday. We thought, I don't know if we thought he was a pole potential, but I think top 10, top 12, but didn't lay the lap down he was looking for. He ended up qualifying 30th in that 7 car, and he's locked in, but that cat behind him, Max Pappas, in that 13 car, he's one of those cars that the only way he can get in this show is race his way in. His speed will not get him there.
No, and Max needs to find some speed, because right now he's toward the bottom of the chart, 49th overall in this practice session. And that's the wrong end of the chart right now.
Just looking, it looks like Brad Keselowski has run the most laps of anyone. Brad has run 27 laps. Jeff Burton has run 25. Casey Kane 24. And I think Darrell would agree, and I think he maybe even said it earlier, get me at least 20-25 laps. That lets me know about half that fuel load's burned off. We've got that many laps on our tires. That'll tell us something about that race car.
What I don't like is coming in and out of the pits on the same set of tires. You go out there and you run 10-15 laps, get those tires really hot, 250 degrees, and then you come in, the car sets, the tires cool off, go right back out. Sometimes that's a little bit deceiving too. So give me a consistent, 20-25 laps, and then let's talk about it.
Let's talk about Brad Keselowski, and let's have a look at what happened to his Penske Dodge last time by. There he is on the inside. You see a puff of smoke there. Brake smoke? Or
locking them up, getting on pit road. Yeah.
And that's something that these guys will do throughout these practice sessions. They hadn't made pit stops in over 3 months, and we know you're going from 190-something miles an hour trying to get down to 55. We know that there will be at least one pit stop in those dual races. More than likely it'll be a caution flag pit stop, but it's just things these guys are trying to get back acclimated to.
Krista?
Casey Kane is out of the car, and we talked about bouncing around. Actually, Darrell, he said it's not really bouncing that bad out there. You said the back end in the racetrack. Talk about this car compared to your shootout car.
It's different. It's the shootout car I felt was you can kind of get slowed down, and then you can take off a little quicker. So we're working on how we can do that, how we can get it to recover a little bit faster. I'm not on the track quite as hard as I was in the shootout, so it's not bouncing quite as bad. It's still hitting, but it feels pretty comfortable. It's a pretty good car.
Thanks, Casey. Matt?
It's a work in progress down in the 31 garage of Jeff Burton, currently talking to his teammate Harvick. He was telling Todd Verrier moments ago that the car a little tight on entry, but he just has no rear grip whatsoever. And then he said the car just feels like the whole car wants to climb up the racetrack, not just the front when he goes over the bumps. So a lot of work going on here on the 31.
Well, his overall speed's good. He's fourth quick on the chart at a 46.44, which is pretty darn fast. But he was fast in practice here the other day, but didn't fare that well in the shootout. So they got a fast car, but they need to figure out how to make it consistent.
This is the first of 2 practice sessions today for Thursday's Gatorade Duel. So you think you know who's going to win the Daytona 500? Well, log on to speedfantasyracing.com, where you can play in your own group or join the overall game for cash prizes. Register now at speedfantasyracing.com. Log on and play. No change in the Fast 5. As we'll go meet the 5th fastest man so far with Krista.
And that would be Carl Edwards. And we've been talking a lot about risk versus reward in this practice. Carl, you guys are done, right?
Yeah, we're done. There's not enough reward out there for us right now. We've got a really great handling race car. Our Aflac Fusion is good. It's going to be a fun race. I mean, it's going to be, they said, what, 20 degrees warmer or something. The long green flag runs are, I think, are going to be a blast. Goodyear did a really good job with this tire. You know, Adam, my tire guy, was saying this is the best tire he's seen, you know, visually once they come off the car. And they're just slippery enough out there that you can really drive. Just a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a great 500.
And I know in the shootout you had a lot of fun racing with your new Ford teammate, Casey Kane. You guys were over here talking. What did you guys have to say a few moments ago?
I told Casey he probably should just loosen his up a little bit. He was only about 30 degrees sideways for most of the lap. He's a driver, you know, and he ran so well in the shootout. You know, our Scott's Fusion was really good too. Just kind of ran out of time and didn't, you know, wasn't able to get back to the front. But I learned a lot, and I think that's the most important thing. You know, a lot of things I can apply to the 500, and hopefully Casey and I are up there in the front.
Thanks, Carl.
You know, I like what they did with this tire here, and I like how they went about developing it. I've always questioned coming down here with 3 or 4 cars in tire testing. You absolutely cannot learn anything. And so what Goodyear did, in September they brought 5 cars down here just to try to get a baseline. And then in November, they brought 17 teams down here and tested, and it seems like we're reaping the reward for bringing that many cars for the tire test.
Yeah, I didn't see in the Bud shootout, I didn't see that big a fall off in that first 25 laps. Certainly the better handling cars, actually, you know, the cream rise to the top there, but I didn't see anybody falling off like we have here in the past where they just about had to park. But one thing that does bother me a little bit, I'm seeing Casey Kane's car bouncing around a lot, moving around a lot. Carl Edwards just sort of verified what I was thinking, what I thought I saw. He said he's 30 degrees loose, but then Casey Kane says he likes his car, so
okay.
Difference of opinion, I guess.
Certainly.
Carl had a good car the other night. Unfortunately, he was caught up in that last lap crash, including both of his teammates as well, but Carl started on the pole and led about the first 20-something laps of that Budweiser shootout.
Much change on the go or go home speed list. Scott Speed, Mike Bliss, who has to race his way in. Casey Mears, Michael McDowell are the fast 4 of the drivers who must race their way in tomorrow. There's the 36 of Mike Bliss at the tail of this draft, past champion of NASCAR's Truck Series.
You know, one thing I love about this bigger restrictor plate, and I mentioned this the other day, I was over at LPGA playing golf, and you can hear these cars. I mean, these cars are loud with that bigger plate. They're making more horsepower, turning more RPM. They're really barking as they go around the track, and it sounds cool.
You know, what's amazing about, we keep talking about the bigger restrictor plate, It's only a 64th of an inch bigger than what we ran here in July, but that is up to about 15 horsepower, just that 64th of an inch, and it obviously has made a big difference.
I know a couple of guys that ended up spending time in the NASCAR jail for trying to make one that little wee bit bigger.
Yes.
Oh, for that, they put you in the jail and throw away the key.
That's right.
Well, that 92 of Mike Wallace, top of the screen, the red car. That looked pretty evil coming off the corner there. Everybody else had to split him and find a different way around.
You know, that's the other thing about a car, like Mike Wallace, for instance. You get out there and you've been pretty comfortable in your car at the speed you were going, but man, all of a sudden you get hooked up with some of these fast cats and you say, whoa, they're about to turn me around.
Casey Kane hits high gear. Tony Stewart behind him.
Gonna have to keep an eye on Casey, see if he's smoothed out his ride a little bit.
Now, explain a little about the difference between the old Ford engine, the R9 engine, in that who's running which. I guess in the shootout, all of the Fords ran the older engine. Is that right?
No, all of them are running the new engine in the preliminary events.
Even the shootout?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure all the cars had the new Ford engine in them in these preliminary events. Even the 150s. When it comes time to make that engine change, they're going to decide then if they've seen enough, if the positive results, if the engines look good, they may run some of them in the 500. But right now their plans are to run the old engine in the 500 because that thing is bulletproof. It's proven, tried, and it's not like it's not like there's something wrong with it. And the R9 is still in development.
Okay.
Yeah, Jack Roush told us on our trackside show, he said, we know this is going to be a better engine, but he said, we're having a tough time getting there just because what we've got is so good.
Okay. Let's go down to Ryan Newman's garage. Krista.
Yeah, a little bit of a fuel pickup issue, it seems, down here. You got the whole world down here looking at your race car. What's going on, Ryan?
I just had a little fuel pickup issue, like you said. I'm not sure what the answer is yet, but it was a handful off turn 2 with the pack behind me, and I had to wave off everybody, it seemed like. But U.S. Army Chevrolet felt pretty good. I think everybody's going to have their hands full for grip and for balance, but it's not bad. We're just trying to make it better.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan's only run 17 laps, so we don't know how much fuel they started with, but you should be able to go about 38 to 42 laps on a tank of fuel.
And here's some bad news. If you're not happy with your car in these weather conditions, as cool as it is right now, you're really going to be unhappy.
Hey, Daryl, I got a text that said they could also hear your golf balls hitting the trees from the racetrack.
Bing, bing.
Sponsify your ride at ToyotaRacing.com with the Sponsifier. You can design yours starting this Friday at ToyotaRacing.com. So Joey Logano looks like he's sponsified.
Sponsor. Kind of a good sponsor on his car.
You know, there's a bunch of cars going to get sponsified after Thursday. Some of those cars with blank quarter panels, because not everybody's going to make this race.
There'll be some wheeling and dealing after those duel races, I will guarantee you.
Matt?
Mike, Kyle Busch second on the speed charts. Good news for this team. A number of teams brought cars down where they clear coated over the decals. Kyle Busch's team didn't. And they're going to have to change those decals because he slapped the wall. He says the car much better with grip, need a little bit more rear grip. They changed the left front spring, but he really feels good as far as the front of the car. The feedback is getting the repeatability, so he's pretty happy with his car. 27 laps so far they've completed during this practice session.
Talked to one team owner that told me that they have 3 cars here, that they brought 2 cars that were what they considered downforce cars, maybe not a total mile-and-a-half kind of car, but something with a little more downforce than you would normally bring to Daytona, and 1 car that had very little downforce. And the 2 cars with the downforce were outrunning the one without the downforce. So if I'm going to have my choice when I come down here to race, I want one that's got a little bit more downforce on it.
And you know, there's so little you can do to these bodies because they're monitored so closely with the grid of templates and all, but there's a lot of things that can be done with underbody, with things in the rear of the car, underneath the car, that you do have the liberty of working with that can help or hurt the downforce.
Well, just think about the angle of the rear end and where you run the car. You know, you can run the car square, straight up, where it's going down the track. Tracking's true. Or you can have the rear end cocked over a little bit where the back of the car is actually towed into the left. They try to get that big wing out of the air as it goes through the corner. So there's a lot of little subtle things you can do that makes a big difference in how the car feels.
Travis Kvapil is running the number 37 this week because Kevin Conway was not approved to compete in Sprint Cup on the 2.5-mile track. So I believe this is a 1-race ride in the 37 for Travis. Is that correct, Larry?
Yeah, he's still going to be driving for this team at California. He'll be in the 34 car. And then David Gilliland, who's actually driving for BAM here, the 49 car, he will be in the 3rd Front Row Motorsports car at California, driving the Taco Bell 38 Ford.
So Quapple in the 37 and Robert Richardson in the 38 is pretty much a one race, or at least for now.
Yeah, the odd man out for California will be Robert Richardson.
Right.
And Kevin Conway will be back in the car there.
You know, the interesting thing about Kevin, his father worked for me, Sam, and his brother, I believe his name was Brad Conway. He was a big part of the CNC development at Yates Racing back when Robert first started making cylinder heads for everybody.
Actually, Brett Conway.
Brett,
yeah.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Brett.
Yeah.
And smart, really smart family. Sam was a great guy. Kevin, I watched Kevin race his Legends cars, his go-karts, and now he's here he is trying to, not today, but next week he'll be getting into the Cup Series.
You know, you see Denny Hamlin back out there in that 11 car. Denny's going to be on our trackside show on Speed on Friday night. We come on at 6:30 Eastern time, and I'm sure we got a lot we can talk to Denny about. You know, he's got that little bit of injury from little pickup basketball game, a little ongoing feud that we maybe saw a little bit of a while ago between Denny and Brad Keselowski. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk to him on our little trackside show.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be aggravating or agitating Brad the way that Denny Hamlin did there coming off turn 4 a little bit, sliding up in front of a guy that doesn't have a lot of love for me.
I think Brad let him know that.
I think that little tap was not it was not a bump draft. We had Brad Keselowski on our show this past Friday, and it's amazing to me the discipline that the car owners have. I mean, Brad was clean shaven, had on his white button-down Penske Racing shirt, pair of slacks with a crease in it sharp enough to cut your hand, and he was standing tall, just like Roger Penske would have all of his drivers do.
Versus the T-shirt and the goatee from a year ago.
And the hat on backwards.
Pants on the ground. Speed's coverage of Sprint Cup practice from Daytona is brought to you by Alien vs. Predator, 2010's biggest multi-species multiplayer event. And by Gillette. Team up with the Gillette Young Guns on Gillette500.com. First of 2 practice sessions for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel that will set the field for the 500.
You know, Darrell, it's something else that a lot of the teams are toiling with, and they may be playing with it during this practice session. We have the gear rule here, just like we do everyone else. You have an option of a high and a low gear, 364 and a 370. Well, these things are turning about 88, 8900 in the draft. That's way beyond peak power. But I don't think a lot of people are running the higher gear because as much as they're getting out of the throttle, you need that low gear to recover when you do have to get out of the throttle.
I always like the lower gear to me is like having a passing gear. You know, like if you lay out of the throttle and you catch somebody and you hold it wide open, you can get by them. And then if you got to play with the throttle, like you said, you got some response there with that lower gear.
And remember in the Budweiser shootout, Kyle Busch was complaining that he felt like he was turning the engine out of the frame, that it was turning way too many RPM.
It does fascinate me because in the past down here, a 292, 300, 310, we'd race at 325 gears sometime, and these guys are sitting here with 64s and 70s. That tells you how much drag the car has in it versus the cars of the past, and that's all that is. It's aero drag that has created them, that allowed them to put that lower gear in there.
All right, Krista, Brian Vickers put up a fast lap earlier, 3rd on the day. What have they done, and what do they want to do now?
Their plan right now, Mike, they're actually going to go run it out of fuel. Brian said that the car's tight, but not as tight as it was on the first run. That first run, they put 16 laps on one set of tires. They have 25 laps on this set. They filled it up with fuel, at least topped it off, and said they're going to go run it dry.
Well, it's important to know how much fuel it will exactly pick up. We know that, especially come Sunday's race, we may get some long green flag runs where you'll run a fuel run. And then, of course, for the engine guys, you heard Carl Edwards talk about, we may have a 20-degree temperature swing. That will change the way they tune these engines. They'll maybe be able to lean it out a little bit.
Turn 2. Looked like Clint Boyer, and he had some help from
David
behind that
Rudeman,
black car.
And David Rudeman was involved with it.
I'm not sure if the 33, though, didn't have something happen before.
Derek Cope.
Let's look at this again, because the 33 takes off. See if he got, it's right here. I think something happens to that 33. Right there, see, he just starts up. Yeah, you see the smoke?
Looks like he's maybe had a tire going down.
Apparently so, when you see that smoke boiling out as he started up the hill. And, man, that's 75. Derek Cope right into the back of Rudeman. That's unfortunate for Derek. But something happened to the 33, and I'm pretty sure it apparently might be a tire the way it takes off here.
Right front. There it is,
yeah,
Darrell.
it's down and up the hill he goes.
So we're under caution, and
there she goes, and of course Rudeman's on the outside.
Nowhere to go.
Here comes Cope.
Boy, he comes in there from a long way back, Darrell.
I don't know what his spotter was telling him, but it wasn't whoa, I don't think.
We're trying to wreck in front of you. Watch this, watch this, watch this, watch this, watch this. It's still rolling straight. Still rolling straight. Still rolling straight. Caution's out.
My kind of spotter. Watch this.
I'm going to tell you what, that may be one of the better spotters in all the garage here is Jeff Dickerson.
No,
he really looks after Kyle well.
Jeff's good. One of the best.
That was a hard lick that 33 car took on the outside wall as well.
Yes, sir. That's Cope's. Well, no, that's Rudeman's car.
The back of his looks worse. And you see where Boyer got into the wall. And there's the right front down. Let's look at the back of Rudeman's car, because that's where the damage is.
Yeah, Cope came in there and really nailed him. Lucky Dog's not happy.
Now, the rule is if you have to go to a backup car for the dual race, you start the dual race at the back of the field, and then wherever you finish, then you will transfer in that position on to the Daytona 500.
So if he had a decent qualifying run, they're going to want to try to fix that.
A lot of work to do, though.
Green flag coming back out after an incident involving Clint Boyer, David Rudeman, and Derek Cope. Matt?
Well, now we've got crisis management going on now. They are going to go to a backup car for the 33 of Clint Boyer. Things happen fast here, don't they?
Yeah, unfortunately, too fast. Just blew it right front. I mean, what more can you say? Just bummer. You know, this is the biggest race of the year. This is one you want to run good at. But unfortunately, we're gonna go to the other car with the Cheerios Hamburger Helper Chevrolet. The guys have worked hard all winter long on these cars. That's what's just sucks, you know. But you know, the good thing is they worked hard on a backup plan too, and that backup car is just as good. The motors runs good. You know, all three cars are up front, top 10 in speed. So I know we can put the package back together. Good thing is, learned a lot from our teammates in the shootout, and their cars handled good. We just got our car handling good. That's the thing. It was loose. Usually when you blow right fronts, it's tight, but we were loose and blew it anyway. So who knows?
Well, that's the story of Clint Boyer. Right alongside is a 00 of David Rudeman. He sustained a lot of damage in that as well. He's talked to a lot of different crew members on his team. Backup car for you as well?
Yeah, there's just not any way you can save it. It's hurt pretty bad on the front and the back. So the Airstream machine is we have to break out the backup of right. It's the way it is.
Walk us through from your vantage point.
It looked like the 33 might have cut a right front tire getting down in the corner there, and you know. Right front goes down, it's kind of hard to keep it on the bottom. He was on the bottom, I was on the top, and his car went up across the racetrack and got in the fence, and I got in the back of him, and then about 5 minutes later, somebody else ran in the back of us there after the wreck was pretty well over with. So pretty disappointing. These guys at the fab shop and everybody at Michael Waltrip Racing, they work awful hard on these things all winter long, and to go out here and tear them up in practice, it just doesn't. It's kind of a bummer, but I'm sure the backup car is as good as the primary, and we'll get it back out for second practice and see if we can make it a little better.
All right, thanks, Terry.
Thanks.
I think I could probably saved that car if it had just been the front, because he didn't get too hard into the back of the 33, but when he got nailed from the rear, that did him in.
Trying to find the handle here at Daytona is perplexing for veteran drivers, for rookies, and how about for the rookie of the year? Joey Logano had an interesting explanation on what his car what he feels like his car is doing. That's what he told Greg Zipadelli when he was parked in the garage a little bit ago.
It seemed like it was worse over the bumps that run than last run. Popping the nose up, hitting the splitter. That just seemed like it was maybe just hitting harder and popping up more or something. Just seemed a little harsher. When the car was tight on the bottom, it would come up more. But when I wasn't on the bottom and I was in the middle to the top, it was loose all the way through. It's just you're screwed either way. You know, you're trying to figure out how you can get it tight enough on the top to be able to run the bottom and still be able to run the bottom decent.
What the deal is with the shock package? So you tie the back down to make the car go fast because you want to hold the back of the car down and keep that big wing out of the air. When you do, when the car hits the bumps, the back won't go down because it's already down, but the front will pop up. So it hits the bump, the front pops up. Then when the rear tires hit that same bump, they skip. The front pops up, the back hits, and it skips. It jumps over the bump because of the rebound in the shock. So he's right. I don't know where the happy medium is. There must be one because some guys seem to be handling it okay, but not for everybody.
Clint Boyer getting the backup car out and ready. Friday, NASCAR's trucks are back. We're there in Daytona for the clashes, crashes, and all the high bank excitement. The NASCAR Camping World Truck Series season opener, Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern only on Speed.
You know, one of the most interesting stories I think about this 2010 truck season and starting right here at Daytona, Kyle Busch, we know how dominant he's always been in that series driving for Billy Blue. Well, now he's driving his own truck, Kyle Busch Motorsports. He has a second truck with Taylor Mawson. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kyle does as a driver owner now.
Well, with his team manager over there, Larry, you know this, you work with Rick Wren. Wherever Rick Wren goes, they usually figure out a way to make their trucks handle well and run well and win. You know, he was with Ron Hornaday last year over there at Kevin Harvick's. Now he's with Kyle. Good. That was a good catch.
Yes, it was. If I was putting any kind of a race team together, Rick Wren would be my man.
Yeah.
Now,
you know,
excuse me, one change in the top 5 among the Go homers. David Gilliland in a one-race ride for BAM Racing, returning to the sport after sitting out for a year. Gilliland right now is 3rd among the Go homers in that number 49.
And of course, as we always talk about the scoring monitor here, once we get into this configuration, you know, it's always nice to know you're as high as you possibly can be. But what probably happened, David got in a pack that was maybe lined up well, catching a pack, and that ran that speed up there. The good thing is he knows his car will run that fast.
About 15 minutes left in this first of 2 practice sessions for Thursday's Gatorade Duel. Can't be near the TV? Get NASCAR race and qualifying results and breaking news right to your phone. Stay up to date with Speed mobile alerts. Text NASCAR to Speed 3 or 773333 to sign up. Here are the Go homers, ranked by practice speed. And those outlined in blue were fast enough in time trial qualifying that they will be in the 500. Now, if you're on page 2, that's the wrong end of the board.
And you know, it seems like every year it comes down to the end of those dual races with a couple of those guys for the transfer spot actually running side by side or nose to tail.
Yeah, it usually comes down to a really good battle right at the finish. And we'll be here live to show it to you tomorrow.
On Speed.
Sam Hornish and Casey Kane. Casey is 7th. Sam is 25th. Brad Keselowski, and look at that splitter that Joey Logano was talking about earlier.
And Sam Hornish has run quite a number of laps in this practice session. He's run almost 50 laps in that 77 car. You know, one other thing that is kind of unique to the dual race is to kind of make it fair for those go or go home guys. The top 35, if you finished in the odd number of owner points of 2009, you're in the first dual race. The even numbers are in the second dual race. That kind of puts an even amount of those guys. And then the go or go homers, you've almost got the same amount in each race. That way one is not saturated or diluted from one group or the other.
Well, that's right. In the old days, you could have all the top 10 in points all end up in one dual race. And, you know, some fellas feel like they had very little chance to make the field. So now they try to even it out.
Well, you know, we've always watched the duels, and the first one seemed like the first one's always the wild one. You know, things happen in the first one, and all the drivers up on the trucks watching. Then they get into the second one, and the second one is almost like boring. Because everybody said, oh, man, did you see what happened there? Oh, man, did you see what happened there? And the first one usually ends up being pretty crazy. The second one pretty sane.
You know, Chris DeVota asked me the other night on the Race Hub show, she said, Larry, which dual race would you prefer to be in? I said, you know, I know back when Jeff and I were crew chiefs, we would look at the lineups, and there's no question. There was always one that was a little more competitive than the other. The way the competition is today, it's hard to say there's an easy and a hard one. I prefer the second one because I don't know how many times we've walked in here on Thursday and the track be totally different. So you can learn a lot by watching, listening, and observing that first race, especially if you've got a teammate in it.
Well, the other reason I like the second one is there are no what ifs. After that first one runs, you know who's got a chance to be in on speed and who's not. And then it's all in your hands. You don't have to run that first race and then wonder what might happen to see if you might get in because somebody else does very well or doesn't.
Yeah, those the adjustments that Larry's talking about. I can remember being sitting down there. It's back when you could do kind of play with the spoiler a little bit. You'd have your spoiler back at maybe 30 degrees, and your teammate is out in the first race, and he's screaming, "I'm so loose, I can't drive it." You're over there with a big rubber hammer beating that spoiler up to more like 45 degrees. Tighten that thing up a little bit.
You're always bumping it up. Did you ever bump it down?
Only when it was
about
necessary.
for the dual race.
Right. Speed's presentation of Sprint Cup practice is brought to you by the Sponsorifier. Visit ToyotaRacing.com starting Friday and enter your design. By Marathon, fueling the American spirit. And by Hershey's Milk and Milkshakes. Try a new way to indulge in Hershey's.
You know, Mike, before the break, we were talking about, you know, the unknowns once the first dual race is in the book. We've had this happen before, and it could happen tomorrow. Mike Bliss in Tommy Baldwin's 36 car is in the second dual race. He has the 6th quickest speed of the go-or-go homers. If indeed Bill Elliott and Joe Nemechek race their way in the first duel, Mike Bliss gets locked in and hadn't even raced yet on Thursday.
That's right. So the go-or-go-home fastest cars: Scott Speed, Mike Bliss, David Gilliland, Casey Mears, Michael McDowell, and Todd Bodine.
If I were Mike Bliss and that happened to me, I'd run a few laps, get a plug check, and bring her to the house.
Feels good. Let's
go.
Get ready to race on
Ready
Sunday.
to go.
Not a whole lot of time left in this practice session. I'd say there's probably a number of crew chiefs down in that garage area that'll be probably more than happy to see the red and black flag waved in this practice.
Matt?
Mike crew chief Pat Trison in the 56 trying to get his car back out for one more run. The past 3 runs, Martin Truex has said the car is just extremely tight. They made a right front shock change, also left front shock change. They're going to try to get a reading so that way they can go maybe a different direction for the second session a little later this afternoon.
And that's the one area that these guys really have to work in is the front of the car, the front sway bar, anti-roll bar, the front shocks and the front springs. And the thing about it, you a lot of the time have to change all 3 of those items because it's a package that works together.
Well, they're gaining on it, Larry, because Truex is the only driver out there to improve on his fastest lap late in the session. His best lap was his 26th of a total of 29 so far. So
I think
they're gaining on it.
Yeah, he and Pat Tryson, he'd probably take a little bit of time. I mean, Pat's used to working with Kurt Busch, and now he's got Martin, and they're two totally different personalities. I'm not sure about their driving style, but just the communication thing may take a little bit of time.
We'll be back with the final moments of the first of 2 practice sessions today. Top 10 on the board. Looks about like it did. All for the last hour or so. But during practice, different agendas, drivers trying different things. Here's Brad Keselowski practicing getting down to pit road speed. And pulling into his pit stall and out again.
Darrell, that has to be tough, trying to get on the pit road with fairly wore out tires. You're out there running 190 miles an hour. By the time you get to the lights, you have to be down to 55.
Yeah, you know, you can give up so much to someone you're competing against. If you don't get on pit road as fast as the other guy does, obviously you're going to lose a lot of time to the field. But man, it's such a fine line between overdoing it, getting a speeding penalty, then you get down here to your pit box and you picked up all that trash on your tires, and inevitably 3 or 4 guys will slide all the way through their pit box. And this pit road is slick. I mean, here, and there's a reason. 24-hour race. Those guys were here working on that pit lane, and you can look at every pit box down there. Look at all the oil. I mean, the pit boxes are slick.
And then, of course, if your crew chief's going to make a call maybe for a short run to change just right side tires, you can't slide and flat spot the left.
See all those dark spots? That's just where in a 24-hour race they come in and add oil to the cars. You see all those places. Those are just oil spots. And so the pit boxes are slick. You can see there. I think I'd go out there and wash that baby down if it's mine.
And a lot of teams do just that. They bring Tide.
Yeah, Tide.
You know, ever since the days Tide was a big sponsor in this sport, they all come out and they're scrubbing down their pit stalls before the race.
Well, oil, and then there's all kind of little debris, pieces of rubber. The 24-hour race was just here 2 weeks ago, so that's still residuals from all that. Let's go to the truck.
Practice is over. Matt Kenseth.
Lunch is ready.
Wins practice. Kyle Busch, Brian Vickers, Jeff Burton, and Carl Edwards are the fast 5.
That's an up on it lap too, 46.33.
And there are the fastest speeds of those who must race their way in. I like Casey Mears' chances. He was out there drafting with some of the really good quick cars out here late in this session. I think he can race his way in.
You know, we talked about the speed of the Hendrick cars. Right now, the fastest Hendrick car, Mark Martin, our poll sitter, 19th quickest in that practice.
All right, in about 30 minutes, we'll be back with the second and final practice session of the afternoon for NASCAR's Sprint Cup Series.